Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our fifth and final Masterclass workshop panel on creating equitable events with Marcelo, Ponce, and Johnny D. Trinh. I am Hina Imam, and I'm the spoken word manager at CiTR, and I'll be moderating this panel and the Q&A session at the end. For those of you who don't know, CiTR is a campus and community radio station at University of British Columbia. And CiTR has had the pleasure to partner with CACV, which is Community Arts Council of Vancouver, and the amazing folks at CACV to provide you with this very exciting and fantastic workshop series. And it's been, for people who've attended other workshops, it's just been a great ride. A few housekeeping things before we begin. Please keep yourself muted throughout the workshop. This event has closed captioning, and you can enable that by clicking live transcript. We will have a Q&A session at the end, so please hold all your burning questions till then, and you can ask your questions either by unmuting yourself or putting your question in the chat and letting me know who you would like to answer that, or if it's for both our panelists today. This event will be recorded and later uploaded to our YouTube channel. Showing your video is encouraged, but you can go off camera if that's more comfortable for you. Now, one more thing before we begin, I'm going to say a brief land honoring, and especially considering this event and this panel is talking about creating safe spaces and creating equitable spaces, it makes more sense than ever to think about that. And I want everyone to just take a moment and reflect on why it is important to do so and what it means to honor the lands we reside on. This workshop is taking place on the unceded, traditional, and shared territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations in the city colonially known as Vancouver, and we honor the historic and continual care of this land by our host nations. Media and art practices have traditionally been rooted in white gaze and colonial narratives. CiTR and CACV understand the power of sharing stories and our responsibility to do so ethically, as well as actively pushing for more equity in the community arts sector. With that, I will pass it on to Kristen, who is the Executive Director at CACV, to say a few words before we begin.
Yeah, thanks for that. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Chung. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the executive director here at CACV. And our mission is to further the development of community arts throughout Vancouver. And yeah, we've partnered with CiTR and Discorder for the past few years as part of our Vancouver Outsider Arts Festival. And yeah, we're super excited to expand our partnership and let's see how we can serve our shared communities through this kind of workshop series. And this is the last one of the series. So yeah, it's been really fun. I've learned a lot myself. They'll be posted on YouTube, like Hina mentioned, and we'll also send a survey at the end. So if you can give us some feedback, that'd be great for us to like improve in the future. So yeah, I'll pass it on to our panelists. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Let's get started. So welcome again to our panel today on creating equitable events. I'm joined by two really talented folks whose work I have been following ever since we've been talking about doing this panel, and I'm so excited to have this discussion with them. As I mentioned earlier, we were joined by Marcelo, Ponce, and Johnny D. Trinh. I'm going to introduce them. So Marcelo Ponce is a young neurodivergent trans and queer person from Mexico City, living in Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam Territory since 2012. Marcelo's work includes consultation, programming development, resource creation, and training on gender and disability. They have worked as the accessibility director at Vines Art Festival since 2019. They center lived experiences and anti-oppression and strive to build relationships based on mutual respect and compassion through their work. And then we have Johnny D. Trinh, who's the artistic director of Vancouver Poetry House, Johnny is also the founder and artistic producer of Stage to Page Performance Society and the current write-in-residence at Moberly, that's a tongue twister, Arts and Cultural Center, and an artist-in-residence at the Lionsgate Community Center in North Vancouver. Trin's current project, Quiet Kitchen, is especially focused on culinary storytelling and unpacking the intersection of Asian queer diaspora in relation to Indigenous and shared histories on these unceded lands. And I also have a quote by them, or I don't know if it's by them, but it's, yeah. It takes a community to build an artist, whether we are nurtured by it or resist against it. And I just briefly want to mention that Ramila Berryman was supposed to be joining us on this panel, but they couldn't join us. And luckily for us, we were able to get Johnny and convince them to join us last minute. So it all worked out. And a little about me, as I mentioned, I am Hina. I've been the spoken word manager at CiTR for almost 3 years now. I'm also a writer, journalist, and audio producer interested in telling stories about culture, migration, gender, and social justice. I also host a radio show called This Is Not Fine on CiTR 101.9 FM. Okay, so with that, my first question to you both is if you folks can talk a little bit about your work, but especially ways in which you try to center equity and safety in your work. Very chill question to begin with. But yeah, maybe we can start with Marcelo.
Okay. Hi everyone. So as Hina said already, I currently work as accessibility director at Vines Art Festival. I think to talk a little bit about that, because most of the things I do are surrounding Vines and with the community that makes up Vines. It's a public art festival. It takes place in public parks. And the goal of it is to platform and reclaim space with other marginalized people in Vancouver. We also do a lot of reclamation of public space and of land. The organization is mostly led by BIPOC, and the festival is also mostly performed by Black, Indigenous, and other racialized people and people with other marginalized identities. So it is, definitely a priority in my work to create equity. So I think, I don't want to get into the differences with what is equality, equity, justice, etc. But I think both equity and justice are something that I focus in my work. I joined Vines in 2019, and I was meant to do something completely different from what I was doing, from what I'm doing now. I was just meant to come in and help out for a few months in the summer. It was a kind of a summer jobs situation. And then, the festival was really small and there wasn't enough time dedicated to accessibility within it. And there was already such a strong base for what we were platforming. But, I think in that time, there was a lot of space for us to take it further in terms of thinking, who isn't usually in art spaces and why. The arts, as you said, are very colonial. They focus on mostly white forms of creating and being. And even though that's changing, that is still very much reproduced in different art spaces. And sometimes, sometimes it's not by choice. We all work within these systems, and sometimes we are still attached to these ways of working. But sometimes, we do need to have a strong set of values that leads us through those difficult conversations and actions that we need to take in order to create space for people who are multiply marginalized, right? So I think I'll stop there, but
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll pass on the same question to you, Johnny.
Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here with everyone. Hina, can you ask the question again?
Yeah, totally. So I wanted to know a little bit more about your work and especially ways in which you try to center equity and safety in your work.
Fantastic. Hey, everybody. So as Artistic Director for Vancouver Poetry House, Vancouver Poetry House is the oldest and largest spoken word organization based in what we know as Canada, and been around for, oh gosh, over 20, almost 30 years or so. It's been a long, since the 90s, maybe longer than that, I guess. And spoken word as a practice is rooted in oral history, which exists across the diaspora, across many nations, all the nations. There's an act of storytelling and passing of story. I'd say that spoken word, in terms of what we know of it as today, the contemporary spoken word, and when we think of poetry slams and deaf poetry and whatnot, that's very much rooted in Black resistance and Black history. And so we really honor that reality. And I think one blessing and one privilege that I have is generally being in a community where people are very justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, Jedi prioritizing. And I'd say that a large number of our local community here and within the national community are all, not all, but many are focused and identify intersectionally as equity deserving people. In terms of the work itself, my own practice is in autoethnographic performance. I'm really interested in how we tell our own stories and the cultural significance of that. Right now, my work is centered around food and culinary storytelling. So many of us who are from away have, identity attached to food and culture. And oftentimes you'll see on many TV shows where they say, "Oh, this is my culture," and then they'll leave it. Like, what next? But what does that mean? And so, and for many of us also, part of where my quote comes from is the idea that, many of us come from resistance. So what happens when that source, our ancestors, our grandmothers, our aunties, our titas, and folks are no longer there to offer that knowledge, when the kitchen is quiet, when that connection is lost? How do we find culture and community? So that's kind of the lens that I like to approach the work from. And there was something else I'd like to say about this. Oh, yes. Actually, I'm calling you right now from the Lionsgate Community Center, calling in because I just finished a residency session here where we're looking very much at that, looking at how on the North Shore right now, there is a very diverse population that are often siloed. There's like the Iranian, Persian communities, the East Asian communities, Ukrainians communities coming in, and then like a lot of the white communities that are here as well. And we want to like mix it up and like build connections. And I think one of the response to what you were talking about earlier, Hina, is the idea that, there is a centering of whiteness. There's something that we orbit this whiteness. And so I really deeply love that for a lot of the work we're doing, we're looking at intercultural support, solidarity work, allyship work, right? And part of that work, and what part of this residency I'm doing right now as an independent artist, is understanding that for so many of us to bring our stories here, for so many of us, like my parents and aunties and uncles who bring in mangoes and import them from Vietnam or wherever else, that has a cost. These costs mean that, for us to have our memories of growing up and eating a mango seed or whatever else, it can impact the ability for Indigenous communities to have their stories with salmon and hunting and the impacts of the biosphere here. So I think there's a lot of implication for us to think in terms of that realm of how can we coexist and how do we find solidarity and support and celebrate indigeneity here and through the decolonizing lens and food and storytelling. And one thing I want to just shout out before, I know I'm taking a lot of mic time, there's so much history within the Indigenous nations for Chinese history of migrant workers and of how they rescued our ancestors when we were struggling to help colonize this land. So, and that's not helped anywhere else, right? TRC 93, let's change the history, let's update the stories of what we're talking about, And then the other thing I'll share is I know that we are talking very much from an ethnocentric, racialized lens. My own personal practice is definitely within Asian and queer diaspora. And I also identify as non-binary, it's not been said. But a lot of my field work, actually, when I was doing my MFA in this work, was working with nonverbal folks and folks living with different disabilities, and looking at accessibility through that lens as well. So the general practice is you do your best. I'm not perfect by any means. We always have challenges, right? In terms of like nuanced situations. We do our best to try to support the least accessible, or rather, sorry, the communities with the least access. If we can support enough of them, then it's good for everybody. And that's not an easy thing. I think that there's oftentimes challenges because we have to also look at our own capacity. What can we do to maintain the health? I really love the current trend of videos going around in the viral meme world. It's a big thing of mine where folks are saying, you know, the idea of sharing, you need to have something to share it. So the idea of self-care and making sure your cup has something to offer. So we can all have something to offer is the thing. So anyway, I think I've talked enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. And I haven't heard the acronym JEDI, and I actually like it more than EDI. And thank you again to you both. And you both talked about white gaze, and something we talk about at CiTR all the time as well. And it's not just white folks, but also racialized folks who internalize that, right? And there's so much unlearning you have to do. Just listening to you both, I was also thinking about something that I think about a lot is model minority myth, and kind of having to like constantly resist the scarcity mindset because it's like communities pitted against each other. So my next question is if you could offer some best practices, or maybe just share an example at work or in real life, maybe to kind of depict best practice. I don't know if that question made sense. I said it in a convoluted way. But yeah, best practices is, I think, what I'm trying to ask you folks. And maybe, I don't know if anybody would like to start, or.
Should we just go in the same order?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Sweet.
Keep it easy.
Okay. So when it comes to best practices, well, what I do and how I've mostly worked in the time that I've worked has been through recognizing the things that I need and the things that the people around me need. And that includes communities of friends, you know, of the friends of my friends, of the people that I see at the places I frequent, or the people that I interact with online or follow online. You know, there's, I think, the importance of having a community around you that grounds you in what you need to do in order to make space for them. It's important. Like, you know, almost everything that I do, or actually all the things that I do at work are because, you know, there's someone in my friend group or around me that I notice that I know needs something very specific. And I try to listen and learn and, you know, just be aware of all these experiences. I think, you know, when a lot of people try to do equity, they go by like a little bit of a checklist, like, oh, okay, do we have so and so, do we have Black folks, do we have disabled folks, do we have, and that is very helpful sometimes, because, you know, like, in order, like, you do have to make sure that people are being seen and represented and paid for their work. And that's one way to do it, but it doesn't mean that much if you yourself are not in community with people, right? What else did you ask? Was that?
Yeah.
I think that was the question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that, Marcelo. But something else I want to just I'm curious about is your role as the accessibility director, and how you said it was supposed to be a summer job, and then you had this big position, or at least just like a very fancy title. So just wanted to deconstruct that a little bit, and I'm curious to know sort of what issues you contend with as the accessibility director, when accessibility is often something that is neglected, and often what I've heard from folks and disabled folks is always the last on the EDI list.
Oh yes, it definitely is. So, in terms of the position being director, everyone at Vines has a position. I think so, that has director in it. I mean, titles are made up. We don't want to be like, it's weird to indicate structure when, like we all sit together and work, and we all have something to do with the direction and the values that we are leading, that we are working towards, right? So that's really important. But in terms of talking about what I do, yes, so disability is definitely the one thing that people overlook the most. And it sucks because it is a lot of the framework of what accessibility is meant to do. At the same time, though, and something that I've learned is that like the way that I thought when I was initially coming into Vines matches a lot with disability justice, which is a framework that was started by disabled BIPOC, that very much was birthed through art, through performance art specifically. There's a lot of books on it. I won't go into that much right now, but because time. But yeah, so it matches with that, and it means that disability is intersectional. It's not. Sorry, I'm blanking a little bit, but I'm autistic, just so everyone knows. So that's something that also makes my work a little bit
That's
special.
totally okay.
I'm someone who has to interact with a lot of people and like do all sorts of these things, but I also really struggle. And I have my own needs and barriers with the work. And I'm also an immigrant, so English is my second language, and I still sometimes like struggle with like coming up with things. But basically, like, I mean, I always tell people, just look at my work. When you go into the Vines Art Festival website, and you go into the festival accessibility page, you will see a lot of things in it. A lot of stuff refers to specifics in accessibility for disabled folks, and refers to different disabilities. But there are some things that refer specifically to like, what do we do if there's an emergency situation, for example, and this comes into safety. Like, a lot of us are people who are at risk of being brutalized by the police. Us in staff have an agreement that we do not call the police as like to the level that we can handle a situation and de-escalate it. Unfortunately, there have been times that the police has been called by members of the public that have felt like the event that we're putting on is not appropriate for the park or the space that we are in. When in reality, what we're doing is presenting we're presenting public free art by people who do not look like the mainstream. In a space where maybe people haven't like heard about a lot of the challenges that people are experiencing, but it doesn't mean that folks are being put at risk, and yet they are putting us at risk. So that's one of the things. And like also else can I? Oh my God.
No, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, all of that.
And that was really helpful, your answer, and for flagging Vines Art Festival's website. I'm definitely going to go check it out. And it's always good to know that within community arts within community arts organizations, we all can learn from one another and borrow knowledge from one another, right? And we're doing this work together, so that's great. And Johnny, wondering if you have any best practices to share, and maybe an example through which you can talk about your role as the artistic director and deconstructed. But before that, I want to preface and say that I did say I'm the spoken word manager at CiTR, but spoken word within the radio world does not mean poetry. I'm not a poet like Johnny. Spoken word means talk radio. And just because we've been talking about spoken word and oral storytelling, I felt the need to clarify that. But please, on to you.
Thanks so much. I want to start off saying, Marcelo, please let me take you to lunch sometime. I would love to get to know you more. You're an amazing human being. I'm sure everyone here is an amazing human being. I'm so honored to share the space with you. Secondly, I want to say, hey, everybody, I am the newest artistic director of a long-standing organization. And I also used to work with the Community Arts Council of Vancouver as well. And neither of us are perfect or good or the best example. We are all struggling, and we're all trying to navigate and negotiate. And it's absolutely capitalistic, and it's absolutely transactional. Let's just be honest about those things, right? And so I just want to bring in that reality that what I'm going to share as my best practices right now at this moment, I try to embody and live them. We try to embody and live them. That doesn't always happen. I think something that I had 3 ideas I want to offer here. Actually, from Kristen's predecessor, Eric Rice Miller, when I was working at the Community Arts Council of Vancouver, he's the one that coined this phrase for me, and it was to move at the speed of trust. And I think that's something that we all have to do in terms of, especially if you're a nonprofit, and especially if you're working with equity deserving communities, is to not rush. Another mentor, dear friend of mine, when I went to clown school, taught me that, we don't have a lot of time, so we cannot rush. And so I forgot this is going to go on YouTube. I will not cuss and speak poorly. We're so grateful to all the funders of the universe or whatever. But truly though, oftentimes funders and producers in that context are from government and from system. And they often like to have things compartmentalized in clear accountabilities, insurance, all those things, right? And truly, many of us are the opposite of that. We are intersectional. We have many different divergences that come up at any given time. And so sometimes when you apply for that grant, it's like, you know what, I've buffered that this is gonna take a year. It might take 2 years, and that's gonna be okay with you, and advocate for that. So I would say that a best practice for producers and programmers, administrators, and arts leaders, and people like myself, it's about having the courage. And we're not heroes for it. I actually don't believe in heroes. I think of a life where, imagine no one had to sacrifice. What if no one had to die to be a martyr? No, let's just give each other enough capacity to function and be successful, So, but to have the courage to say, I need to advocate and say, yes, I know we applied and agreed to this thing, but here's the reality of what's happening. And that's, I think, a way we can actively challenge those systems and disrupt them a little bit and truly reset them. Another thing too is, actually, I see them in the corner. This is quickly. This is a board member of the Community Arts Council of Vancouver, and my partner in action. This is Pierre Leichner. Hi, and this is a panel. And so Pierre and I are working on this group, and Pierre's done a lot of work in the community in the downtown east side as well. And he has a lot of experience working with neurodivergent folks. And one thing that I really love about Pierre's work, and that's why I said yes to working with him, is the idea of oftentimes we arts organizations are in a service role supporting, equity deserving communities. But if we're truly going to center folks, it's okay to be messy. It's okay for things to not completely work out. It's okay to have a project, go derail for a little bit, because if we are going to fully give agency and space to folks who think differently, speak differently than what we consider the norm, the thing that we often conform to, let's be real, about that part. So then how do we like activate that and celebrate that divergence and have things okay being a bit messy? So anyway, those are some best practices. Pierre says yes, thank you. So well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love to live in a world where there is space for humans to be fallible, and I feel like perfectionism leads is I don't know, sets you up for failure. But it seems like you have another thought.
Yes, sorry, I just something this I have many soapboxes. I adjust my wig. My last one I could share is this. I think that when there is such a culture of burnout in trying to do equity work,
oh yeah,
generations flip really fast. And I think that one educational piece that I would offer to myself, I remind myself every day, is that the shoulders of the giants that I stand upon, all of our ancestors who did the work, they're also human, and they had the language they used. I was recently doing a lot of work in terms of Asian heritage and recognizing Asian heritage along in the nation in what we know as Canada. And through great honor and privilege, I was able to meet so many world-changing, system-changing ancestors, you know, elders. They're not dead yet, so elders, please stay around. And the language is different, you know. And you know, when I was living in rural Saskatchewan for a while, I had a lot of Asian community members I was engaging with that readily used the term Oriental because that's the term that they knew. And so something that I think is really important as a best practice is that, you know, to take a moment and recognize who are you speaking to? What is the nature of the relationship, whoever you're dialoguing with, and kind of understanding their vocabulary. I think meeting people where they are at means you also have to make sure that we're speaking the same language and honoring whatever language we bring to the table, and then really trust that we have the best intentions. Because if, you know, sometimes when someone says something that is maybe, who am I to judge someone in their learning? Maybe they didn't know how to use that word, or maybe they didn't know that they shouldn't use that word or whatever, right? And so this could be that moment of discussing change, and maybe that word's coming back and I didn't know, and now I'm learning myself too. So really having that humility in that space, especially intergenerationally, especially in our discourse, is definitely a best practice that I'm learning the hard way. But I think that we can all do better, and you know, speaking to our elders and our futures, our younglings, in a compassionate way. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for saying that, because it's such a great segue to my next question, which is meaty. I will preface or give you a disclaimer, but something that I've been really curious about in my work in talk radio and working with media ethics and writing content guidelines for the station is around language, and something that I'm a big nerd about, but also it's tricky, it has its limitations. And what you said, Johnny, about language, I agree, just giving people the grace, because also it's such a specific and narrow way to look at it when we start language policing. English is not everybody's first language. I mean, it's not my first language. So my question is around language and how it's ever evolving. Something that is cool right now, or a term that is progressive right now, 10 years later, it might not be appropriate. So especially around that, but also something that I have been really interested in reading about and thinking about is how language also becomes meaningless when we overuse it. And so how can we still make meaningful impact with social justice language in terms such as inclusion, accessibility, community, safe space, which I'm sure the two of you have rolled your eyes when you hear it, because it seems it's performative, and you know, and it is, right? And so how can we still use that language and create a meaningful impact without virtue signaling? So it's a lot. But if you can parse through it and offer some comments on it, and maybe we can start with you again, Marcelo.
Good old language. I just did a workshop on that last Sunday, and part of it was explaining that, like, Of course, the language that we use matters, and the words that we say out loud really matter, and how we say things. It is like, you know, naturally the things that we say reflect what we think, always, no matter what. On that note, sometimes, like, you know, with a lot of these words that are used with equity and social justice and safe spaces, etc. You know, I recognize that a lot of language does come from academics and people who are involved in academia, but also there's a lot of language that is used and expanded on by people who do not belong to academia. I did some studies, you know, a little bit. Once in a while, I'll join a class and I'll be like, but mostly I do not. And a lot of the people that I am around of also have, like, are dropouts and or haven't, like, gone to any post-secondary, or like haven't even, like, you know, done any, like, high school and stuff like that. And it does not mean that they are not people whose values and ideals and language don't, like, come to the table and intend to be liberatory for themselves and their community. So that's something that's really important. Like, sometimes when you hear people throwing like a lot of words, like, you know, you have to wonder, like, who are they? Where do they come from? Would they say so if you ask them? Can we see that there are people who, like, you know, are housed solidly and have always been housed solidly? Like, are they people that come from more like intergenerational wealth? Are they people who, like, went through post-secondary and therefore have access to, like, fancier jobs and know the thing, like, what to say and when to say it and to who to sound better and higher? And is that the way in which language is being used? Because at the end of the day, I think we can all, well, no, not me, I have a lot of trouble pretending to be things that I'm not. So autism, I'm sure that there's autistic people that are really good at that. That's not me. You can usually tell when I'm displeased and, like, mistrusting. But yeah, I mean, beware, people. I'm very specifically mistrustful of people who don't ever interact or talk to anyone that's in the downtown east side. Or I woke up in a new. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what that was. That was really strange, and I don't know where.
Could have been some trolling, but.
Oh yeah, I don't know where that came from, but I hope that doesn't happen again. But thank you so much, Marcelo. And you bring up a great point around language and how it can be weaponized, right? And people can say all the right things, but not mean it. And a lot of journalism historically has been harmful, especially around Indigenous folks and downtown east side, and a lot of parachute journalism. So I'll move on to you, Johnny.
Yes, thanks so much. Tonight, I think big thing. I think I'm going to answer questions. I'm going to try. Okay. I don't know if this is what I thought when I was inspired by this moment. Tonight in the workshop we did today, our one thing that Pierre and I are doing is inviting local experts, known knowledge keepers. And so the chef, the guest that's cooking, new.
Sorry, you're cutting out a bit, Johnny. Could you repeat that?
One second. One second. Is that any better?
No, there seems to be a lot of echo.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, I think that's better.
Just 1 second. Oh, okay. So tonight she doesn't speak English pretty much at all. And so we'd asked her to come and do demonstration. And because she was so eager, she brought family and friends to come, and they did a whole PowerPoint video presentation about Ukraine. We had no idea this was happening. And it totally took up a lot of time we didn't know we would have. But the power of it was that there was a profound silence. Everyone in the room held space, knowing that this was a challenge. And it was so visible to see how these videos and these stories and this presentation was impacting our Ukrainian presenters, their families, and the people in the room that identified as such as well. And that was just really profound and important to note of that, the idea of silence and space and patience, and setting that agreement with everyone in the room, saying, you know, there are different paces of understanding. And really want to echo what Marcelo was saying around language facility. This is actually something that was challenged. So I think the question was about, you know, lessons learned and, you know, learning the hard way. I said that earlier. It's happened to me. When I was, 20 years ago, I was fired from a research project. And what happened was that I was trying to impress the professor, it was university. And so I was using easily 4 to 5 syllable words regularly to show how critical I was and whatever. And I didn't know any better. I was like 19 or something. And I should have known better, but I had to learn that way because it made the participants uncomfortable because they didn't always understand those words. And so with complete support and understanding and encouragement, I stepped back because I had lost the trust. And the important thing was that for these participants to feel trust with the project. I was just an individual. I was a cog in the machine of trying to make some positive change, right? So I think it's really important to think about and challenge yourself on. The thing is, you know, for a lot of us nonprofits, a lot of us art producers and organizers, we're applying for grants. They give us what 300 words. So of course you're going to see equality, equity, diversity, including like 100,000 times. It's just so nauseating. And I think the important thing is just to be completely real. And I think this biggest strength is when you have a clear agenda, a clear relationship. It's like acting. Who are you talking to? What do you want? And when you meet them there, there's got to be no airs of class or exclusion or fragments. It's just about saying, hey, where are you at? And this is what you understand. We'll do that, right? And we will go as slow as we can. All right. Is that person still here? Okay, I guess not. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. No. Thank you for that. And that was a beautiful story that you shared. And I think, just to echo what you said, important to keep it real. We do need the money. We live in a capitalist society after all. And trying to be a martyr, or I don't know. I mean, yeah. And what you said about if there didn't have to be any heroes, and but I have another question, but I'm also mindful of the time. We are at 7:48 and we have almost 10 more minutes. So maybe we could open the floor for questions. I do have one more question. If you folks are able to quickly answer, and I'm sorry, my questions are not something you can quickly answer, but I was just wondering in terms of funding, right? Because working, the three of us, we all work in not-for-profit and community and arts organizations. We're always struggling for funding, and when a lot of community organizations are up against that when it comes to funding, but also resources. A lot of us are overworked because we really care. And something I always joke with my friends is do what you love and you'll never stop working. So anyway, with that, how do I suppose we demystify equity? And I don't know, any maybe last thoughts on this before we open the floor to questions. Marcelo.
Well, when I think about equity in regards to funding, I mean, it's complicated because different things are happening with funding in different institutions. Right now, there's some institutions that are giving more funding that is based around equity and justice, and there are some institutions that are planning to take away funding if you criticize the institutions, aka the city. Saying, but I won't talk about that much. I think, you know, at the end of the day, there's institutions that have like over $3 million budgets and like, you know, will be paying people like $500 to headline and stuff like that, or will have like unpaid positions for like their accessibility and like things that should be properly compensated. That's part of the issue. Like, where is your $3 million budget going to, you know? And I think we should really be asking those questions. Like, all nonprofit like financial reports are public, and I think we should all be like asking every organization that we like work for, perform at, create for, etc. Like, where on earth is your budget going if it's not to pay people properly, especially BIPOC and like disabled people and poor people, etc. You know?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for that. Such a great point. Transparency is crucial at the end of the day. And I appreciate that, but also putting it into perspective that almost like, yeah, not to get into press freedom and all that, but yes, that's what's happening in the city right now as we do this panel, which is ironic. But yeah, Johnny, any last thoughts before we open the floor for questions?
Over the last, I'd say 4 or 5, yeah, I'd say 4 or 5 years, maybe 7 to 10. There's this movement where the governments are trying, whether it's performative or not, we will leave that. But there's this thing where it says, oh, you must have this education or the equivalent or lived experience. And I think we should lean into that. So if you're cool with me sending a video of my resume, I'm going to send a video. I'm going to, you know, like there's this thing where I find that sometimes there's an attempt at trying to be more accessible by reducing barriers. And I sometimes think that we don't know what that means in general. We just think this is something that could work. And I think that oftentimes equity deserving communities, marginalized voices are then asked to suddenly be the expert of the thing. Oh, how many times has been like, Johnny, queer non-binary person, what should we do? You know, like suddenly I had to learn these things to understand the current culture and nuance of those things. So I think that we lean to this comfort and make use of what's available to challenge that and to create this idea, or not this idea, but the reality of normalizing deregulation, normalizing and making it commonplace that, you know, we are going to use whatever adaptations we need. And I think that's the biggest part in terms of what you were saying there, Hina and Marcelo, around burnout, right? We keep shooting above our weight category if we're talking about this as a fight. And a big part of it is understanding, no, this is actually work. What is it? What is your actual capacity? What can you do? And how often have we, you know, scramped and saved and found a source of funding to provide ASL or provide captioning or do whatever, and it ends up hurting our actual bottom line because people don't see that, you know, it costs this much. I'm like, no, it costs this much. Give me this money to do this thing, because then it doesn't hurt the rest of my organization. I can actually run the programming like we're supposed to, and we don't have to like accommodate or sacrifice something for the quality of it, right? So, you know, really communicating the quality and importance of the work is, I think, vital to being accurate with that funding. Too often we do more for less, and I think it's time to do more for what it costs. I don't know the current value of it. And then specifically in terms of gaps of funding, I think that Part of it is also understanding exhaustion. You know, recently, I'd say definitely within the last 5 years, there has been a movement in a lot of the common large funding bodies in what is known as Canada here and in this region, where they're pushing for an equity and diversity inclusion lens. But for a lot of artists, for example, who may not have learned that language because we went to a conservatory training where we were really focused on codified practice of something, right? It's about taking time to understand that language. And again, it's about going back to being real, saying, well, you want me to do these things, but I am doing these things and bring community together. I may not say it in the language you want, but I'm doing the work. So you should value that, right? So about reframing that communication is really important. Hopefully that answered the question. Yes.
Yeah,
And I could be
it
wrong.
does.
I'm not the expert, everyone. You can totally like say, who is this person in the comments? Go for it.
No, that totally made sense. Thank you so much. And yeah, I just want to wrap it up with saying that this comes up time and again in media, that who should be telling whose stories, and inequity and equity should be everybody's priority. Everybody should pick up the pieces, right? It shouldn't be just left for marginalized folks to do all the work, because burnout is real. And I am going to end the panel with that. Thank you so much. This was so great. I learned so much, and please invite me when you both get coffee, because I would love to join and continue this conversation. We won't be recording the Q&A session, so people can feel more comfortable, and maybe you can stop the recording now.